I used to believe that love was proven in the quiet moments, shared meals, tired smiles, and the way two people promised to grow old together, even when life felt unbearably heavy. When I married Daniel, I believed we were that kind of love story, not the loud, dramatic kind people admired from a distance, but the steady, patient kind that survived storms. We had nothing when we started. Our first apartment was barely more than a box, with cracked tiles in the kitchen and a window that refused to close all the way in winter. We slept on a mattress on the floor for the first 6 months, laughing about it, telling each other it was temporary. Daniel would wrap his arms around me and whisper, "One day we'll have everything." I believed him because I wanted to. I worked long hours at a modest job, while Daniel jumped between ambitions, always searching for something bigger. I supported every dream. I proofread his plans, encouraged his risks, and reassured him when things didn't work out. I told myself that marriage meant carrying the weight together, even if I carried more of it most days. My mother worried about me. She was quiet about it, but I could see it in the way she studied Daniel when he wasn't looking. She had raised me alone, working double shifts, saving every extra dollar. She taught me resilience, humility, and the value of independence. "Love should never cost you your dignity," she used to say. I thought she was just being protective. When she fell ill, everything shifted. Hospital rooms replaced dinner tables. The smell of antiseptic replaced the warmth of home. I spent nights holding her hand while machines hummed softly beside her bed. During the day, I rushed to work, exhausted but determined. Daniel said he understood, but understanding came with conditions. He complained about the house being quiet, about eating alone, about how my attention was elsewhere. When I asked him to come with me to the hospital, he always had an excuse: too tired, too busy, too uncomfortable. "She's strong," he would say, "she'll be fine." But she wasn't. As my mother grew weaker, I grew stronger in ways I didn't recognize yet. I learned how to survive on little sleep, how to smile through pain, how to love fiercely when time was slipping away. Daniel, meanwhile, grew distant. The warmth between us cooled, replaced by polite conversations and long silences. I blamed stress, grief, life, anything except the truth I wasn't ready to see. The night before my mother passed away, she pulled me close and whispered, "No matter what happens, promise me you'll never let anyone take advantage of your heart." I promised her. I didn't know then how soon that promise would be tested. When she died, it felt like the world cracked open. The grief was suffocating, endless, raw. I came home from the funeral numb, expecting comfort, expecting the man I loved to hold me together. Daniel hugged me briefly, then he stepped back. Something had changed, though I couldn't name it yet. His eyes weren't on me anymore. They were somewhere else, measuring, calculating, waiting. I stood there in black clothes, grieving the woman who gave me life, unaware that I was about to lose something else too. Not just a marriage, but an illusion. Grief doesn't end after the funeral. It lingers in the corners of rooms, in unopened drawers, in the way silence suddenly feels heavier than noise. Days blurred together as I moved through my mother's house, sorting through her belongings with trembling hands. Every object carried a memory, every memory a fresh ache. A week after her passing, the phone rang. It was a lawyer I had never met. He spoke gently, formally, as if he were afraid his words might break me. He told me my mother had planned carefully, quietly for years. She had left everything to me: her house, her savings, investments I never knew existed. It wasn't just enough to live comfortably. It was enough to change a life. I sat down on the floor and cried. Not because of the money, but because even in death, my mother had protected me. When I told Daniel that evening, his reaction wasn't what I expected. At first, he was silent, Then his eyes widened, not with sympathy or pride, but with something sharper interest. He asked questions quickly. How much? When would it be transferred? Was it all in my name? That night, he held me tightly, almost desperately. He talked about our future in a way he hadn't for years: new homes, travel, businesses we could start. He called it our inheritance. Something in my chest tightened, but grief made me ignore it. Within days, his warmth turned cold. He started criticizing small things: the way I spoke, the way I dressed, how long I mourned. He said I was dwelling too much on the past and using grief as an excuse. He stayed out late, glued to his phone, guarded and distant. One morning, over coffee that had gone untouched, he said the words without looking at me. I think we should get a divorce. The mug slipped from my hands and shattered on the floor. He said he needed space. That he wasn't happy, that we had grown apart. His voice was flat, rehearsed, like he had practiced this speech somewhere else. I asked him if there was someone else. He didn't answer. What hurt more than his silence was the timing. Weeks ago, I was his wife. Now, after my mother's death, after her money, he was walking away. The days that followed felt unreal. Papers appeared, lawyers called. Daniel moved into the guest room, then out entirely. He avoided eye contact, avoided conversation, avoided responsibility. Yet every now and then, he'd mention how fair the division would be, how marriage meant sharing everything. That's when I understood. He believed he was entitled to my mother's legacy. He thought divorcing me would still make him rich. I spent nights staring at the ceiling, replaying years of memories through a new lens, the sacrifices I made, the signs I ignored, the moments I excused. Love hadn't blinded me. It had trained me to forgive too much. One afternoon, I met with my lawyer. I expected more heartbreak. Instead, I felt something else: relief. Inheritance was protected, completely, legally untouchable. Daniel had no claim, no matter how long we were married. I walked out of that office feeling lighter for the first time since my mother's death. Daniel didn't know yet, but he would. When I told him, his confidence cracked. He laughed at first, then argued, then accused me of hiding things. He said I had changed. He said money had corrupted me. I watched him unravel with a strange calm. The man I thought I loved was gone, and in his place stood a stranger who had revealed himself far too late. The mask had fallen, and there was no going back. Pain has a way of rearranging a person from the inside out. After Daniel moved out, the house felt hollow, but it was a different kind of emptiness than grief. This one carried clarity. The silence no longer felt like abandonment. It felt like space to breathe. I cried when I needed to, in the shower, in the car, late at night when memories crept in uninvited. But I stopped crying in front of him. I stopped explaining myself. I stopped trying to convince someone to see my worth. That alone felt like a quiet victory. Daniel, on the other hand, grew restless. His messages shifted from cold formality to sudden friendliness. He asked how I was doing. He reminded me of old vacations, inside jokes, promises we once made. Every word felt calculated, like a fisherman slowly reeling in a line he thought was still attached. I didn't bite. Instead, I focused on what my mother had left me. Not just money, but wisdom. I reread her old journals, the ones she hid in a drawer beneath stacks of receipts. She had written about fear, about sacrifice, about loving people who never fully saw her. And she had written about boundaries, how she wished she had set more of them. I decided I would honor her by learning. I met with financial advisors. I asked questions without embarrassment. I learned how to manage what she had entrusted to me. Each decision I made felt like reclaiming a piece of myself that had been slowly given away over the years. Daniel noticed the change. He accused me of becoming cold, of acting superior. He said I was punishing him by refusing to talk. I told him calmly that we were communicating through our lawyers now. That's when fear crept into his voice. He realized he was losing control. He started showing up unannounced, claiming concern. He reminded me that marriage was about forgiveness, about standing by each other during confusing times. He said he had made a mistake filing for divorce. I listened quietly, patiently, then I reminded him that the mistake wasn't the filing, it was revealing who he truly was. Behind closed doors, I rebuilt myself piece by piece. I renovated my mother's house slowly, thoughtfully, keeping her favorite window, her garden, her creaky stairs. I donated some of her clothes. I framed her letters. I turned grief into purpose. The stronger I became, the smaller Daniel seemed. During mediation, he tried one last time. He talked about compromise, about fairness, about how we both deserved a fresh start. His voice shook when the numbers were discussed. Reality was sinking in. He would walk away with nothing he hadn't earned, and he hadn't earned much. I didn't gloat. I didn't raise my voice. I simply signed where I needed to and walked out with my head held high. Outside the building, the air felt different, lighter, warmer. I realized then that strength didn't always roar. Sometimes it whispered. Sometimes it looked like calm eyes and steady hands, while someone else unraveled. I went home that night and slept deeply for the first time in months. Not because the pain was gone, but because I finally trusted myself to carry it. And that trust was something no one could ever take from me again. The divorce was final on a crisp morning that smelled faintly of winter and new beginnings. Daniel sat across from me in the lawyer's office, stiff, pale, and completely drained. He had argued, bargained, and tried to charm, but it was all useless. Every paper he had assumed would give him a slice of my inheritance had been carefully, legally protected. For the first time, I watched someone realize that their cunning had failed. I didn't gloat, I didn't sneer. I just let the silence between us speak volumes. The final signature went down. His tie was crooked, his hands trembling slightly. I could see the desperation in his eyes, the slow understanding that everything he had counted on was gone. And yet, as he walked away, shoulders hunched, I didn't feel triumph. I felt peace. That peace was far sweeter than any petty revenge could ever be. Daniel had underestimated me for years. He thought grief would weaken me, that his betrayal could break me. But he had forgotten one crucial thing. I had grown under pressure. I had learned to stand alone, and standing alone didn't feel lonely anymore. It felt liberating. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into rebuilding a life that was truly mine. I renovated my mother's home, keeping the small touches that reminded me of her. Her favorite window in the kitchen, the garden she had painstakingly tended for decades, the little notes she had left in drawers. I created a space that felt alive, comforting, and filled with memories that belonged only to me. I also invested in myself. I started a small business in an area my mother had always encouraged me to explore, blending creativity with financial sense. I made friends who genuinely supported me, who celebrated success without envy, and who reminded me that love and respect should never feel like a transaction. Every decision I made, every milestone I reached, became a quiet, sweet revenge, not against Daniel, but against every moment I had ever doubted my own worth. His betrayal had fueled me, not destroyed me, and that realization was far more satisfying than any courtroom victory. Months later, I ran into him at a cafe. He was older, wearier, the lines on his face deeper than before. He glanced at me as if hoping for recognition, for the warmth he thought he had left behind, for the illusion that I would still need him. I smiled politely, a soft, serene curve of my lips, and continued walking. There was no need for confrontation, no need for words. He had already understood the lesson. I was untouchable in ways he never could be. The sweetest revenge is watching someone realize too late that they lost what they thought they controlled, and then seeing them leave empty, handed while you thrive. I had feared loneliness after my mother's passing, but I discovered something far more profound: freedom. Freedom to grieve without judgment, to love without expectation, to live without compromise. Freedom to honor my mother's legacy while shaping my own future. I started a scholarship in my mother's name, helping young women who reminded me of myself, ambitious, hardworking, and underestimated. Each student who received support, each life changed, became a living testament to the love, resilience, and wisdom my mother had instilled in me. And as I sat in the sunlit garden, watching flowers bloom where my mother had planted them decades ago, I understood something powerful. Revenge had never been about money, control, or Daniel. It had been about reclaiming myself. I had been betrayed, yes, but I had emerged whole, stronger, wiser, and finally free. The world I now lived in was brighter, fuller, and entirely my own. Daniel was a shadow of the past, a reminder of a chapter I had outgrown. And the best part, I didn't need him to complete my story. I had become my own ending, the happy, triumphant ending my mother had always wanted for me.